The first video has intelligence covered as a very traditional uh, synonym for the notion of understanding. That is, if a person understands a lot, he is intelligent. And maybe you have not uh, gone through any trouble between video 1 and video 2 to explore distractions, common distractions in the computer environment. And the third one was about a refutation of the ideas that you have to be non-judgmental to pay attention as opposed to judgmental. This is a very interesting question. If you are to be dependent on it, if you are to be dependent on it, means that if you have to watch many lectures, or if you're a student, basically you have to make the choice if you're going to be judgmental or not. Let me close the window just a second. And from that choice, you need to have access to the feedback that allows you to confirm if the choice is correct or not. So you're left with a contradiction, because the feedback is itself a judgmental syntax, right? And since you cannot accept feedback and be non-judgmental at the same time, meaning if you are to consider feedback, you have to be judgmental. And so you are either closed in a loop in a non-judgmental, non-feedback environment where you go to lectures and you don't understand them. Maybe you are able to reproduce some of the things like a parrot, but you're not really understanding them. And the other loop that you get stuck is the loop in the judgmental side. Since you value feedback and you necessarily by logic value judgment, then you have to keep on doing that unless you have brain damage or something. But I think that even brain damage must be something that might not reset that resolution, because memory is the most redundant resource on your brain. And I'm going to link something that proves this on the video description, but you can take my word for it for now until the video ends. So even if you're brain damaged, you are able to remember the conclusions that you had when your brain was functioning right. And you're more likely to value these conclusions, by the way, because you know your brain damage, right? Anyway, so there's two kinds of people, and so you have to say you can change it from non-judgmental to judgmental, but I think you cannot go the reverse way. It seems like, at least in a rational manner, it is impossible to go back. So it's like a one-way street that's from non-intelligence to intelligence, and that's how we can say that intelligence converges, for example. That's another argument. That's a whole other topic. Let's use some of the popular philosophy that gets cited for people who develop this kind of independent thinking. That is, this kind of judgment that allows them to basically be immune to the mental craze that is propagated by the media. And all the biases that culture makes you endure. Let's say that something like the philosophy of Ayn Rand is right, for its own sake. And Atlas Shrugged is a 1957 novel by Ayn Rand, and that's the book that I'm going to use to uh, judge Ayn Rand's work. I'm not going to go beyond that. And it's the magnum opus, of course, and it's a very big book. It's published in 1957, and the book depicts a dystopian United States in which private business suffer under increasingly burdensome laws and regulations. Sounds familiar? Railroad executive Dagny Taggart and her lover, steel magnate Hank Riordan, struggle against looters who want to exploit their productivity, including Dagny's brother and Hank's wife. As Dagny and Hank fight the looters' efforts to control their business operations and confiscate their production, they realize a mysterious figure called John Galt is convincing other business leadership to abandon their companies and disappear. While investigating a strange electric motor found in a ruined factory, Dagny finds sheltered valley where Galt and the missing businessman have been hiding. Galt is leading a strike, all productive individuals against the looters. The strike escalates when Galt announces his views in a radio address, leading to a collapse of the government. In case you haven't figured this out, Atlas is a Greek deity, a Greek supposedly famous. It was supposed to be famous by now, but unfortunately modern culture doesn't give a damn. And Atlas was condemned by Zeus to hold the sky. And what happens if someone who's holding the sky decides to shrug? It has a double meaning, of course. To shrug is to persevere in the face of adversity, in this case more than verbal adversity. And since Atlas holds the sky, the second meaning is about a businessman deciding to shake society as they try to remain not redundant, basically, to remain functional and to persevere on their identities as some kind of resilience with a collateral of society as a whole. The strike escalates when Galt announces his views in a radio address, leading to a collapse of the government. The novel ends with the strikers planning to build a new capitalist society based on Galt's philosophy of reason and individualism. The theme of Atlas Shrugged, as Rand described it, is the role of man's mind in existence. The book explores a number of philosophical themes from which Rand would subsequently develop objectivism. In doing so, it expresses the advocacy of reason, individualism, and capitalism, and depicts what Rand saw to be the failures of governmental coercion. Atlas Shrugged received largely negative views after its 1957, but achieved enduring popularity and consistent sales in the following decades. Publisher, Random House, 1,168 pages, first edition. Yeah, the edition that I got to see was a translation to Portuguese, and it had around 750 pages. That's from the local bookstore. So Rand studied operations of the New York Central Railroad, and as research for the story, and Rand's stated goal for writing the novel was to show how desperately the world needs prime movers and how viciously it treats them. So, do you understand what prime movers is? There is a concept in theology of first movers, and it's a concept that is defined in the creator of a universe and it goes beyond that because there are degrees, of course, and it's basically a concept of agency and what happens to the world without this agency. And this is something that's not to happen in the mind of non-agents by mere chance. It doesn't happen in their minds. It doesn't occur to them that there's a great dependency on a small number of people that make the shots and are not necessarily the bureaucrats or the military or everyone who lives a life that enjoys the fruits of others without their consent. Let's see. So it seems that Rand finally achieved her message, and this was her last book. She finally, I guess, she finally was able to produce the message. And what does this has something to matter for a person like a student? A student is someone who is supposed to be intelligent. And intelligence is the one thing that's required for someone in charge of deciding where money is invested. So you should see student as an investor without money. He has some other resources that can be invested. It's not money. But nevertheless, these resources are worth money. And sure enough, you can see the student as an investor. So what would be the one resource that, or at least the one product that is wanted by an investor like a student? Well, maybe if you look at the moment where you want something and you base this desire as the general wanting of things, you will know that when you want something, you clearly know when you don't have it and when you have it. And you're really aware of it, and it's in this mental framework that you initiate the bodily, physical course that leads to the end. There's for the closure of this video, I'm going to say that a student needs to read more of Ayn Rand maybe, and see things as people that see things as the people that have goals, and not as the people that are for lack of a better word, parasites without goals.